Hello, I am Marwan Bishara. After a two-year election campaign, the American people have given their verdict on the Bush administration. They voted decisively for change, the mantra repeated so often by President-elect Barack Obama. But what will the election of America's first black president mean to the rest of the world? And has its war on terror and the terror of its wars left scars that cannot be healed? To set the scene, Nashwa Nasruddin explores Bush's legacy.
The taste of victory. After the longest and costliest presidential campaign in US history, Barack Obama has crossed the finishing line ahead of Republican rival John McCain. The result has been greeted ecstatically by many around the world.
Barack Obama è il 44e presidente.
L'America ha scelto la storia, Barack Obama è il nuovo presidente.
But will President Obama deliver on his promises, and can he fulfill the high expectations of his presidency? For as the curtain closes on the Bush era, he leaves behind countless pressing challenges that will haunt his successor in the White House for years to come. The global political landscape which Obama now surveys differs hugely from the one his predecessor inherited 8 years ago. During Bush's first election campaign in 2000, he went to great lengths to insist that he would not meddle in world affairs. But he soon changed his tune, launching his war on terror and putting the world on notice.
No threat will prevent freedom-loving people from defending freedom. And make no mistake about it, this is good versus evil. We must take the battle to the enemy, disrupt his plans, and confront the worst threats before they emerge. In the world we have entered, the only path to safety is the path of action, and this nation will act.
And that he did, with disastrous results. The world looked on in horror as the systematic torture of Abu Ghraib prisoners came to light, while, hidden away from view, hundreds of prisoners were detained without trial in Guantanamo Bay. Iraq sank deeper into chaos, costing the lives of hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and thousands of American troops. Meanwhile, the forgotten war in Afghanistan resurfaced and began to spiral out of control. And throughout his tenure, Bush's supposed desire to introduce democracy in the Middle East has backfired spectacularly. Never more so than in January 2006, when Hamas were swept to power in the Palestinian elections, only for the US regime to refuse to recognize its legitimacy. So, as the new president steps in, the world holds its breath, and Obama will find out all too soon that the problems abroad can't wait until he deals with the economic challenges at home. For even the financial meltdown has had bitter repercussions all across the globe, leaving America's international reputation in tatters. And with no track record in dealing with foreign affairs, there is only Obama's campaign rhetoric to go on when trying to determine whether the world is about to witness a new beginning or merely a false dawn.
Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you.
Obama's campaign has proven one thing beyond any doubt. He is a consummate politician who knows how to tailor his message to the audience he's addressing. Last summer, as he was greeted like a rock star during an appearance in Berlin, he drew on the city's potent history when he called for the tearing down of barriers.
The walls between old allies on either side of the Atlantic cannot stand. The walls between the countries with the most and those with the least cannot stand. The walls between races and tribes, natives and immigrants, Christians and Muslims and Jews cannot stand. These now are the walls we must tear down.
And yet, just 24 hours earlier, during his visit to Israel, his message had sounded somewhat different.
Israel's security is sacrosanct. It is non-negotiable. And Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel, and it must remain undivided.
But now that the campaign is over, the real battle is just beginning. Barack Hussein Obama has overcome the racial barriers at home to become the first black president in US history. But will he be able to dismantle the numerous barriers erected between the Bush administration and the rest of the world?
Joining me in the studio to discuss the prospects of a new American foreign policy in light of the landslide victory for Barack Obama is Dr. Priya Gopal. I believe you're a specialist in post-colonial studies at Cambridge University. And Stryker Maguire, a contributing editor for Newsweek, as well as Seamus Mill. You're, of course, the associate editor for the Guardian newspaper. And last but not least, Tariq Ali, novelist and historian. I would like to start with you, Stryker. Looking at America from across the Atlantic, do you think the elections were a referendum on the Bush legacy, or were they about the suitability of Obama to be president?
I think inevitably they were both things. I mean, America was going to be putting Bush behind itself, regardless of whether McCain or Obama won. That was the one thing we knew for certain, and it was the one thing that frankly, Americans were very relieved about, as was the rest of the world. But clearly, one of the things that happened over the last several months, I think especially since the Democratic National Convention, we saw Obama, I almost said the president, we saw Obama speaking at that stadium in Denver. Ever since that time, the whole object has been to make him, as you say, suitable, to make him look like a president, like a leader, like somebody who could lead America.
Dr. Gopal, how much did race play in these elections? And again, looking at it from your post-colonial perspective, what does it say about America to elect an African-American president?
It is important to remember that Obama himself played himself as a post-racial candidate, and he's talked about.
What does that mean? By the way,
well, I think what it means, as he described it, was that he saw himself as post-civil rights generation, a generation that did not, as he has explicitly said, rely on what he calls victimhood to become a politician or to become a leader. So in a sense, I think he was marking the distance between himself and a particular form of civil rights struggle and perhaps a particular form of identity politics. It's not clear to me that, in fact, that he is post-racial, even though he describes himself as post-racial. He also has described himself as a kind of blank screen on which people can project whatever they want. And it is very clear that in the elections, while he may have been something for one group of people, certainly for many black Americans and many non-white Americans, he has represented the coming to age of the civil rights legacy.
Can I just add something to that? Because I think it's a good point.
Please.
You know, he had to make a decision. He knew that in America he had no choice but to be black, even though, of course, he has had a white mother and a black father.
Bound by his race.
Exactly. The other thing is that if you look at the exit polls, and if this had been an election in which only whites could vote, he would have lost.
What does it say, Seamus, about America in the sense of voting for an African American? To the rest of the world, is this a goodwill gesture? Is this a message of wanting to engage the rest of the world after 8 years of Bush?
Well, it seems to me it partly is. I mean, it obviously has a huge symbolic significance in the US itself, but it also projects America to the rest of the world in a much more symbolically favorable light. And it's a huge opportunity for the American establishment in the broad sense to try and re-engage with the rest of the world on more sensible and sustainable basis, because they've got really a very, very good brand here now to kind of resell America to the world.
Especially that he did underline the idea of American soft power and ideals rather than America's hard power, military power, and so on and so forth. But in real terms, Tariq, this is a huge historic day. We don't see that in Europe. There is something unique about America. 40 years ago, they were sitting in the back of the bus today he's in the White House.
Well, I could go further than that and say that during the first 3 decades of the last century, black Americans were being lynched in the South. You know, their bodies were hanging from the poplar tree, in Billie Holiday's words. And then in the 60s, you had a massive struggle for desegregation and civil rights, and the right to go on the same bus, and the right to go in the same school. So regardless of how Barack Obama describes himself, it's very obvious how Afro-Americans see him. And they see him as part of the struggle of black America to assert its equality and its civil rights. And to have a black family in the White House is something very significant for the sociology of American politics. The second thing I think worth stressing is that an overwhelming majority of young people, it's a generational shift as well, voted for him. And the combination of these two delivered him.
Tariq, hold on that thought. And when we come back, Jonah Hall will bring us some reactions from around the world.